There's a strange difference between fear in the movies and fear in real life. Don't you agree? In films, everything has a structure, a setup, a soundtrack, and a clear ending. But in real life, fear often creeps in more subtly. It doesn't always crash over you. It's often just a small feeling, a vague unease that latches onto the back of your neck and slowly grows over time until you realize you've been changed by it. Halloween night, the night we actively seek out that fear, sometimes becomes the gateway. And tonight, I want to invite you to step through that gateway with 4 stories that those who tell them swear are true. They are haunting recollections told by voices that still tremble. So, take a seat and listen closely. Story 1, The Last Trick-or-Treater and the Unpaid Debt. Meet David. He was an architect, a practical man with a logical mind. At the time, he lived in a quiet suburb with quaint little houses and white picket fences. That Halloween night, the weather was strangely cold, and a fog had begun to descend early, wrapping the streetlights in hazy halos. David had prepared meticulously. He had 2 full bowls of candy, hung spooky decorations, and even set up a speaker playing eerie moans. Kids came in droves, and the atmosphere was lively. But by about 9:30, as a light drizzle started to fall, the street grew empty. The laughter and pattering footsteps had completely ceased. David, feeling satisfied with a successful night, stood up intending to turn off the porch light. 3 slow, clear, patient knocks sounded at the door. David turned back, slightly surprised. He peered through the glass pane but saw no one, only the opaque white fog. Probably the wind, he told himself. But then the knock came again, more insistent. When he opened the door, a bitingly cold rush of air made him shiver. And there, under the sickly yellow glow of the porch light, stood a little boy. He wore an old-fashioned flat cap, pulled down slightly over his pale face. The suit he wore was comically oversized, making him look even smaller. But the detail that caught David's eye was the shoes. They looked ancient, made of leather, and were caked with mud, as if he'd just walked through a field. "Trick or treat," the boy said, his voice monotone, devoid of any excitement, almost mechanical. David smiled, trying to shake off the strange feeling. "Well, buddy, you're just about the last one." He reached for the final candy bowl, which only had a few chocolate bars and a pack of gummies left. He poured them all into the boy's vintage straw basket. "All alone? Where are your friends or your parents?" The boy didn't answer. Instead, he slowly raised his hand, his thin, long index finger pointing with certainty down the street towards the old oak tree park, a large plot of land with ancient oaks that had long been the subject of local whispers. David looked, and for a moment he thought he saw a faint shadow among the trees. "You should head home," David said, his voice slightly strained. The boy nodded once, very slowly, almost unnaturally. Then he turned his back and walked away. David stood there, watching the small back until it completely dissolved into the thick fog. A strange, icy tingling ran down his spine. The next morning, stepping out to get the newspaper, David was startled. Right in the middle of his doorstep, the boy's straw basket was neatly placed. Inside, there wasn't a single piece of candy. Instead, there was a strong, musty odor of decay. There were crumbling, damp leaves, some dry straw, a few black feathers from some kind of bird, and a yellowed black and white photograph. The photo showed a group of children in early 20th century clothing standing in front of a large wooden building that David recognized as the old orphanage, the one that had burned down in a horrific fire on Halloween night, 1921. And in the middle, smiling stiffly, was the boy in the suit and flat cap. David, his curiosity driven by fear, sought out Mrs. Miller, the neighborhood's oldest resident. Upon hearing his description, she shook her head, her eyes full of pity. "Son," she said, her voice gravely, "that boy. They say he was one of the children lost in that fire. His body was never found. Every Halloween when the fog rolls in, he wanders, trying to find his way home. Perhaps you were the first person in a long, long time to give him candy." David never hung Halloween lights again. Story 2, The Upstairs Room and the Long Ago Promise. Chloe, a young graphic designer, loved adventure. So when she was invited to a costume party at the Blackwood Manor, a long-abandoned, rumored to be haunted mansion, she couldn't say no. The party was extravagant. Hundreds of people in elaborate costumes danced under strobe lights. The music drowned out everything. But after a while, Chloe felt overwhelmed. She needed a moment of quiet. Remembering a tip, she made her way up the large, ornately carved but partially rotting wooden staircase to the second floor. The contrast was jarring. Downstairs was a world of sound and light. Up here, everything was submerged in a heavy, almost oppressive silence. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever, with faded old rugs and portraits of what must have been previous owners, all with eyes that seemed to follow her. The air was noticeably colder. After using a small bathroom, the flickering orange light from the end of the hall drew her in. A heavy oak door was slightly ajar. Curiosity overruled reason, and Chloe pushed it open. The sound of the old hinges was piercing. The room inside was a perfect contrast to the rest of the house. It was immaculately preserved, like a time capsule. Wooden toys were neatly arranged on shelves. A wooden cradle swayed gently, though there was no draft, and in the middle of the room, under the warm glow of a massive pumpkin-shaped candle, a little girl in a pristine white nightgown was sitting, stacking wooden blocks into a small house. "Hello there." Chloe spoke softly, not to startle her. The girl didn't turn around. "I'm waiting for my mother," a clear, calm voice replied. "Where is your mother?" Chloe asked, taking a step into the room. She could feel a distinct coldness surrounding the child, contrasting the warmth from the candle. "She went to the field to find my father. There was a storm. She promised she'd be back before the candle goes out." The girl's voice held no anxiety, merely a statement of fact. Chloe looked at the candle. The flame burned high and steady. Not even a single drip of wax had fallen. "It won't go out for a long time, sweetie." At that, the little girl turned her head. Her face was very pretty, but her eyes were strangely deep and old. And then, she slowly raised her hand and pointed at the wall behind Chloe. My mother looks just like you." Chloe spun around. On the wall was a large portrait of a young woman in 19th century attire, with blonde hair done up high, wearing a pearl necklace. And that face, it wasn't just similar, it was identical to Chloe's, from her features to her eyes, down to a small freckle by the corner of her lip. An icy cold shot through her heart. She bolted down the stairs and found the host of the party, a middle-aged man named Arthur. His face paled as he listened. He led her to an old family genealogy in the library. "That's Eleanor Blackwood," he whispered, pointing to the woman in the portrait. In 1898, her husband Edward got caught in the fields during a storm. She ran out to find him. They found her body the next morning, not far from the house, struck by lightning. Their little daughter, Beatrice, waited in that room all night with a candle she had lit for her. They say when the candle went out, the little girl's heart stopped too, and no one has dared enter that room since. Chloe left the party without saying goodbye. She never dared to go back. Story 3, The Selfie and the Uninvited Guest. Mark, Jenna, and Liam were a trio of close friends, adventure seekers with strong mental fortitude. For an authentic Halloween experience, they chose Ridgeview Cemetery, a place abandoned since the 1950s where tales of wandering night spirits had become urban legend. They arrived at 10 p.m. The full moon cast a cold, silvery sheen over the tilting headstones and overgrown weeds. Wind whistled through old pines, creating creaking sounds. They took pictures as they walked, trying to reassure each other with jokes. "Hey, let's get a group shot," Liam suggested, pointing towards a large black marble angel statue, its wings half broken, its face eroded beyond recognition. Perfect Instagram backdrop. They lined up. Liam held up his phone, the screen flash lighting up. They laughed and bent down to check the photos. The first two were completely normal, but the third... Jenna was the first to scream. Right behind them, half hidden behind the angel's torso, was a face. A middle-aged man with hollow cheeks, sunken eyes, dressed in tattered, old-fashioned clothes. His gaze wasn't fixed on the lens. It was locked onto the back of Jenna's head with a look of yearning, agonizing despair, as if he had just recognized a long-lost loved one. He was right behind us, Mark stammered, his flashlight beam frantically scanning the area. There was nothing, just darkness and cold stone. Terrified, they ran to the car, their hearts pounding. Safely inside, Liam, hands still shaking, unlocked his phone. At that moment, a notification popped up. This memory. His heart stopped. The photo app suggested a 1-year memory. The photo displayed was the photo they had just taken, the three of them, the angel statue, and the man. But the timestamp read, October 31st, last year, 10:17 p.m. The exact same second, the same minute. Is this a joke? Jenna whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Last year we were at a party. We've never been here before. They could never explain it. The photo remains in Liam's phone, a terrifying reminder of a memory that never existed. Story 4. The Dress and the Attached Spirit. Anya wasn't just a seamstress. She was an artist. With a passion for history and vintage fashion, she decided to create a masterpiece for Halloween, an authentic Victorian mourning dress made entirely by hand. She spent months researching, sourcing the exact shade of blue-black velvet, crafting intricate lace, and even dyeing her own thread to match period colors. Putting it on felt different. The velvet hugged her form perfectly, the corset was snug, and the skirt billowed out with a stately grace. Looking in the mirror, Anya barely recognized herself. She didn't just look like a Victorian woman, she felt like one. There was a formality, a lingering sadness she attributed to getting into character. At the party, she was the center of attention. But the joy faded. The dress began to feel strangely heavy, as if made of lead instead of fabric. The collar felt tighter, almost constricting. A profound sense of disappointment and loss welled up inside her for no apparent reason. The laughter around her sounded shrill and inappropriate. She felt an urge to cry. Back in her dark, silent apartment, the feeling intensified. She walked into the bathroom, trying to remove the hairpins. As she looked up into the mirror, her heart shattered. For a split second, the reflection wasn't her. It was a woman with pallid skin, red-rimmed, desperate eyes, and a small scar on her chin that Anya didn't have. It vanished so quickly she thought she was tired. Then she reached back to pull the zipper down. It wouldn't budge. She twisted, pulled harder. Useless. The zipper was frozen shut. Panic began to rise, and then, from nowhere, a wave of cold air hit the nape of her neck, followed by a whisper, clear and full of anguish, right next to her ear. They lied to me. He didn't die in the war. He left me. For another. A choked sob. The shame. It was unbearable. I couldn't endure it. You have worn my sorrow. Now you must live with it, or find a way to bury it. Anya screamed, using all her strength to rip the dress off, seams tearing, fabric flying. She threw it into a corner like a venomous creature. The next day, with the torn dress in hand and dark circles under her eyes, she went to a professor specializing in historical costume. The old academic, after a thorough examination, exclaimed, "It's extraordinary. It's identical, down to the stitch." He showed her an old newspaper article on microfilm. The headline, "River Body Identified as Elizabeth Haversham." The article told of a young socialite who was believed to have taken her own life on Halloween night, 1888, after discovering her fiancé had eloped with his mistress. It described in detail the blue-black velvet mourning dress she was found in. The very dress Anya had unknowingly created a perfect replica of. It was said that Elizabeth's spirit could not move on due to her humiliation and betrayal, and she still sought someone to share her burden. Anya burned the dress to ashes, but sometimes on quiet nights she can still hear the whisper of a woman crying. Conclude with a thoughtful, profound tone. So there you have them. 4 stories, 4 encounters that those involved will never forget. They walked into Halloween with skepticism or simply seeking fun, and walked away with a terrifying truth. Sometimes the past never really goes away. It just waits in the shadows to be spoken of, to be seen, or even to be worn. So tonight, when you dress up as someone else, or when you open the door to uninvited guests, remember, there's a thin line between pretending and reality, and on that boundary, we aren't always the only ones walking.